Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the general elections coming up in 2024. Now, I'm going to be filling out this prediction map based off of my experience as a political canvasser, my travels of the United States. I've been to 48 out of 50 states. I've had plenty of opportunities to talk to a lot of different people from a lot of different places. I've been to a lot of deep blue states and spent a lot of time there. I have lived in red states. I've lived in swing states. So with that being said, I'm going to do my best to shoot straight with y'all and give y'all an unbiased opinion. There's a lot of channels out there that are biased one way or another, and I'm going to do my best to avoid that. If you guys find this video enjoyable, please feel free to subscribe, leave a like on the video. It helps out. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and fill out this election map. We're going to go ahead and start things off by filling out the safe blue states. These are states that are going to go for either candidate by 12 percentage points or more. And I do believe that the states of Washington, Oregon, and California are all going to go for Joe Biden by more than 12 percentage points. He won all three states by a significant margin in 2020, although I do think he won't do as well in 2024. I do believe he will pick up all three states by at least a safe margin, and I would be surprised if he did less than that. I also believe that he will win the state of Colorado by a safe margin, and this might come as a surprise for some people, but this is a state where Democrats have made a lot of ground. Republicans have just not done well here. In the early 2000s, this was a swing state, and it often did vote Republican, but not anymore. Joe Biden is also going to carry a lot of these northeastern states like Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, Delaware and Maryland, D.C., as well as the 1st District of Maine. We're going to go ahead and move on to the safe Republican states, starting with Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, a lot of these Great Plains states, Nebraska's 1st and 3rd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, the deep southern states like Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Indiana. These are all states that are going to go for Trump by over 12 percentage points, and I would say the state of Iowa will as well. It's polling over 12 percentage points, and similar to Colorado, Iowa is no longer competitive. It's a state that Republicans have done very well at securing in their column. Now, I do believe that Maine's 2nd Congressional District will also be a safe Republican this time around, and that pretty much concludes all of the safe Republican states for Donald Trump. Currently, we have 129 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 126, but there's still a lot of states to fill out on the map. And now that we've filled out all of the safe states, we're going to go ahead and move on to the likely states. These are states that are going to back either candidate by under 12 percentage points. Our first likely state on the map is the state of Hawaii. Now, this is probably going to come as a pretty big surprise to a lot of people watching this video. Hawaii is a state that has historically backed Democrats by a pretty significant margin, and in 2020, Joe Biden won the state by nearly 30 percentage points. Currently, we only have one poll out of the state of Hawaii, and it has Joe Biden winning by only 8 percentage points. Obviously, this is a pretty significant drop-off in support considering how much Joe Biden won the state by in 2020. And I really think the reason for that boils down to the Maui wildfires and how a lot of people in the state feel like the federal government left them out to dry. And considering the fact that Hawaii is the most expensive state to live in the country, given our present state in the economy, it makes sense why Hawaii might be more competitive than it was in 2020. Moving on to our next likely state for Joe Biden, we have the state of Illinois. Now, this is a state where Joe Biden won by about 20 percentage points. But given the present state of today's economy, along with a lot of people moving out of the state of Illinois to other states like Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, I do believe that the state will fall under the 12% margin of victory. That would make it a solid state. Our next likely state for Joe Biden will be the state of New York. Now, this is a state where Democrats have done historically very well. Joe Biden won the state by over 20 points just 4 years ago. And I do think that he'll win the state. I just don't think he's going to do as well here. And according to the current polls we have out of the state of New York, he's only winning the state by 8 points. And I really think that boils down to the illegal immigration issue, the resignation of Andrew Cuomo, and just how expensive everything is in the state of New York. It's ridiculous. I was there not that long ago, and I was quite surprised just by how expensive everything was in the state of New York. And the same goes for the state of New Jersey. I do think this is another state that will be a bit closer than it was in 2020. Everything in the state of New Jersey is also pretty expensive. When I was there, I was personally very surprised by that. The main poll we have out of the state of New Jersey has it to be about 7 points. Now, I personally think it's going to be a little bit more than that for Joe Biden, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't win it by double digits. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Considering the fact that Republicans were really close to winning the governorship in the state of New Jersey when they weren't even supposed to be competitive, I would say that this is definitely a state to keep an eye on. Moving on to our likely Republican states, we're going to go ahead and start off with the state of Alaska. This is a state that voted for Donald Trump by about 10 points, and I honestly could see this being a safe red state. I put it as a likely red state just because the state sometimes tends to be a little bit weird. There's a lot of ticket splitting, and the state, it's a conservative state, but it definitely has a bit of a blue streak in there. Our next likely Republican state on our list is the state of Texas. Now, this is a state that, generally speaking, has been historically very conservative, and I've spent a lot of time in Texas myself, and I can definitely say that is the case. However, as the major Texas metros have grown in recent years, Texas has definitely become more competitive than it has been in past elections. I do think that former President Trump is going to do better in Texas than he did in 2020 when he only won the state by 5.6 percentage points. I think he's going to probably carry the state by about 9 points, which is very similar to his margin in 2016. Our next likely state for the GOP is the state of Ohio. Now, Ohio did used to be classified as a swing state, because it was very competitive in 2004 and in 2008. Generally speaking, Ohio has been a swing state in times past. However, that really isn't the case anymore. Since 2016, Ohio has been reliable for the GOP, and similar to Iowa, it has taken a pretty significant shift to the right. However, unlike the state of Iowa, Donald Trump is only polling at about 8 points in the state of Ohio, respectively, which is why it's in the likely category, not in the safe category like its neighbor Iowa. Our next likely state for former President Trump is none other than his home state of Florida. Now, Florida used to be considered a major swing state for the GOP. However, a lot has changed in the last decade in the state, from going from flip-flopping from being a red and blue state to being a state that has reliably backed Republican candidates. If you look at 2022, the state backed both Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis by over double-digit margins, which in the state of Florida would be considered a landslide victory. The Republican Party has definitely made a lot of ground in the state, and for the most part, the Democrat Party has been putting their money elsewhere in the country. And that pretty much concludes all of the likely states, which puts former President Trump at 219 electoral votes to President Joe Biden's 191 electoral votes, with 128 outstanding electorates on the map. Now that we've covered all of the likely states for both candidates, we can move on to the lean states. And the lean states are going to be categorized as states that go to either candidate by 5 percentage points or less. The first state we're going to categorize as a lean state will be the state of New Hampshire, and I think Joe Biden will win this state by a couple of points. He's only polling at about 3 percentage points right now in the state of New Hampshire. However, I do think that he'll take the state by probably a few more points than that, just because the state has been shifting to the left. It's in New England, and I really don't think Trump has a good shot at winning the state. I think if he was going to win it, he would have probably won it in 2016, which he nearly did. And I think that Biden will also probably win the state of Maine by a point or two, which is all he really needs to win the state. I know there are some polls that say that Trump is actually going to win the state of Maine at large, although I don't really think that's going to happen. I mean, if it does, that's really good for Trump, and it probably means he's winning pretty much every other competitive battleground state out there. But at the same time, I don't know. I've been to New England a few times, and every time I've been there, it's just very, very liberal. I also really don't think that Trump is going to win the state of New Mexico. Now, this is a state that could have probably been classified as a likely Democrat state. And the reason I didn't classify it as a likely Democrat state to begin with is because it has a large Latino population, which is why it did not fall into the likely category, because Latinos have been shifting to the right in droves. We're seeing that happen in Florida, which is one of the many reasons the state has become such a stronghold for the Republican Party. On the subject of Republicans losing, however, I do think Republicans will lose the 2nd District of Nebraska. I think they're going to probably lose it by about 2 points, and it's just because this district is so liberal, and it's where Omaha is, and it's just Generally speaking, the major metro areas of a state tend to go blue and the rural areas tend to go red. And unless Trump is having a really good night, I really don't think the 2nd District of Nebraska is going to go red. However, I do think Trump is going to hold on to North Carolina. This is a state where Trump held on in an environment that did not favor him in 2020. This is a state that has voted red for a long time, actually, with an exception to 2008, where Barack Obama just narrowly flipped the state in a landslide year for Democrats. In fact, he won the state of Indiana by a larger margin than he won the state of North Carolina, and Indiana is classified as a deep red state. So I really don't think that the Democrats are going to be able to pick off North Carolina in this scenario, and I really think that Republicans will be able to hang on to it and they'll enjoy the 5 or 6 point advantage that the polls are giving them. Another state that I think Trump is going to pick off this cycle will be the state of Georgia. Now, this is a state that did go to Biden in 2020, and I think Trump's going to win it back this time around because there's no George Floyd fiasco going on. There's no reason for the black vote to get out en masse and vote against Trump, really. And if you ask me, with how disliked Biden is nationwide, I really don't think a lot of these less motivated Democrat voters are going to get out and support someone they're not exactly in line with. They may not support Trump, but they don't like Biden either. And so they'll either go third party or they won't vote at all. And I could really see that causing Georgia to stay in the Republicans' column. And I could say Trump will probably win it by about 5 points, which is what the polls relatively are suggesting will happen. And I also think that Trump is going to carry the state of Nevada by a lean margin as well. This is a state where Republicans haven't won in quite a while, but I think that if they're going to win it, they're going to win it this time because there's just so much working in their favor in the state of Nevada, and Trump wanting to get rid of taxes on tips is going to definitely work in his favor in a state like Nevada. And Republicans have made a lot of ground in the state, and it's definitely a prime target for Republicans this time around. And with that, we can conclude the lean states, and we can now cover the tilt states. These are states that are going to go for either candidate by a margin of 1 point or less. Right away, the first state I would like to talk about is the state of Virginia. Now, I've seen some polls out of Virginia that have said that it's either a tie or that it's very, very, very close. And that's probably true. And I'm going to say Biden still wins the state, but not by a lot. And the reason I say that is, well, first of all, in 2021, Glenn Youngkin flipped the state, and nobody thought he could, and he did. And since then, Joe Biden has just made one mistake after another, and a lot of people see him as a weak leader. The whole Israel-Hamas conflict, something we will talk about more extensively when we cover the state of Michigan. He's done a pretty good job of infuriating both sides on that issue, and this is a state that even if Biden wins, he's going to have to defend, which means less money going to really critical states like Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, even Minnesota. On the subject of the state of Minnesota, I do think Biden will also probably win this state. I could be wrong about this one because with the third-party vote share, and that's something that will affect the state of Virginia as well, but it's going to really affect Minnesota. With RFK Jr. going out there, he picked a pretty liberal vice presidential candidate. He's going to eat into Biden's margin, and a lot of people are not happy with Joe Biden. And when I worked in Wisconsin on canvassing projects, I really noticed that a lot of people didn't like Joe Biden, even if they were a Democrat. They hated Trump, but they couldn't stand Joe Biden either. So a lot of those people are going to end up voting third party, which means Trump actually does have a legitimate chance to end the Democrats' massive voting streak that goes all the way back to 1972 in the state of Minnesota. I do think that Trump is going to win the state of Wisconsin, though. And the reason I think this is mostly because a lot of people are moving out of Milwaukee, and I've spent a lot of time in Milwaukee, and I can tell you all, North Milwaukee is awful. It's on par with parts of LA. It's disgusting. It's awful. The infrastructure's terrible. It's just a really, really depressed part of the city to live in. A lot of people are moving out of Milwaukee, which means these rural areas in the rest of the state, their vote's going to matter more and more, and the state is going to become more and more conservative. In my opinion, I think what will happen in Wisconsin is what's happened in Iowa or even Ohio. I really think Wisconsin is going to become more of a red state in the next 10 years. I also think Trump's going to probably pick off the state of Pennsylvania. I think that this is a state where Joe Biden, as a Democrat, has done awful. I think Democrats, if it was almost anyone else on the ticket, not Joe Biden, I think the Democratic candidate would probably win Pennsylvania and probably do all right in Wisconsin. You know, you got Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, and she's doing all right in the polls, and she's holding her own in Wisconsin. But Joe Biden, I mean, even if you look at the Senate polls for Pennsylvania, I mean, any other Democrat would be better than Joe Biden in this state. I mean, seriously, it's ridiculous. If you look at what's been going on, he went in, when he got in office, he said he wasn't going to ban fracking on federal land, and then he did to appease the environmentalists, and, you know, that's a pretty big broken promise for the people of Pennsylvania. So we'll see if they vote for him or not. I really think they're going to probably end up voting for Trump just because of the third-party vote share. The Israel-Hamas war, the economy's been so bad lately that regardless if it's Biden's fault or not, whoever's in charge is going to get the blame for it. And I saw that happen when it came to Trump and the COVID issue. When I was working in Wisconsin, I saw that got brought up a number of times by Democrats who, you know, regardless if it's Trump's fault or not, they're going to blame him for Corona and how it was handled. On the topic of other states, though, I think another state that Donald Trump is going to pick up this cycle is the state of Arizona. And this is a state that did go for Biden narrowly, and it's a state that's been trending to the left every election cycle, and I think that Trump will pick it up this time. And I think one of the reasons why Trump is going to do better this time that I've really not talked about too much, and I want to talk about it right now because I'm going to talk about Michigan in just a second, is this whole Israel-Hamas war. And you've got people who are Muslims, right? The normal generic Muslims who are going to support Palestine. They're going to side with Hamas. Not all of them, but some of them will. I mean, there's people like me out there who can understand that, you know. You might not necessarily agree with them if you're on the other side of the conflict, but it makes sense while they're siding with them. Then you have these people, these college kids they probably can't point it out on a map. They are pro-LGBTQ, they're pro-trans, and they're going to these campuses, tearing everything up to free Palestine, and specifically they're siding with Hamas. And if you're an average voter like me, for example, you see that and you're like, you do realize that if you go to Gaza with your LGBTQ mindset and your liberal ideals, they will give you a flying lesson off of a skyscraper. I'm not kidding. I just learn a little bit more about Islam before you go and protest. And that's something that I've heard repeated many times by not pro-Palestine people, or even people who are pro-Palestine. They don't understand why these leftists who are so hell-bent on destroying Israel are supporting Hamas when Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has been a safe haven for the LGBTQ community, and it's completely legal to be gay in Israel, and it's not in Palestine. It's a very backward situation. It's a situation that has got a lot of your average white voters, and even your black voters too, and Latinos, you know, just pretty much anyone in America looking at this and they're like, what in the world is going on with this country? What is wrong with you people? And that's something you're going to see happen a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I do think that Trump will pick off a state like Michigan. And this is a state where there are a lot of Muslims. There's a lot of people who are genuinely angry with Joe Biden on how he handled the war with Israel. And there's a lot of people who are on the other side of it who are like, you guys are crazy. What's wrong with you people? And so I do think that Trump is going to pick off the state of Michigan. And I think that this is probably what our map's going to look like for 2024. It's really a shame for the Democrats that they don't have someone better to put on the ticket other than Joe Biden. Because, I mean, that's not even mentioning the obvious problems he has with dementia. Just as an executive, he's not done a good job in the eyes of a lot of people out there, and I think this is what you're going to be looking at. Even though Trump is very dislikable to a lot of people, I think that Joe Biden is worse in most of the sense. So anyways, guys, that concludes this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe. This is a new channel, and I will be posting more political content on a regular basis.